What's up, history fans? Welcome back to the Jaxom Talks channel. Today we're diving into the story of one of World War II's most fascinating warships, the German heavy cruiser Prinz Eugen. Now let me tell you, this ship had more plot armor than a main character in a badly written action movie. While her more famous sister ships went down in flames and glory, Prinz Eugen somehow managed to survive everything the Royal Navy, the RAF, and eventually the US Navy could throw at her. Only to end up dying slowly, in a tropical lagoon, after being nuked not once but twice. You literally cannot make this stuff up. So grab your coffee and let's settle in, as we talk about the heavy cruiser that refused to die. Our story begins in the 1930s when Nazi Germany was doing what Nazi Germany did best. Completely ignoring international treaties, in this particular case, the Washington and London naval treaties, which were supposed to limit the size and armament of warships. Germany had signed on to a limit of 8-inch guns for heavy cruisers, but beyond that they were getting creative with, well, basically everything else. When the Prinz Eugen was built, she was the third ship of the Admiral Hipper-class of heavy cruisers. Now, these ships were supposed to displace 10,000 tons. Spoiler alert, they didn't. The Prinz Eugen actually displaced over 14,000 tons standard and over 18,000 fully loaded. That's the naval equivalent of saying you're 6 feet tall when you're really 5'10". Everyone knows you're lying, but technically you said it. The Hipper-class was designed to be fast commerce raiders. The idea was that they'd zoom around the Atlantic, sink British merchant ships, run away from anything bigger than they were. Basically, they were to be the naval equivalent of that annoying mosquito you can't quite swat. They packed 8-inch guns in fort wind turrets, 12 4-inch guns for anti-aircraft work, and 12 torpedo tubes. The Germans really believed in the if some is good, more is better philosophy of ship design. Construction of Prinz Eugen began at the Germania Werft shipyard in Kiel in April 1936. She was launched on August 22, 1938, with some serious Nazi pageantry, as was the style at the time. The ship was named after Prince Eugene of Savoy, an 18th century Austrian general who had absolutely nothing to do with Germany, but who had kicked the Ottoman Empire's ass repeatedly, which apparently made him cool enough to name a warship after. Now here's where things get interesting, or rather, where things get delayed. The Prinz Eugen wasn't commissioned until August 1940, over 2 years after her official launch. Why, you ask? Well, it turns out that building a massive heavy cruiser, while also preparing for world conquest, is a bit of a resource management nightmare. Go figure. When Prinz Eugen finally entered service, she immediately started having problems. Her first captain, Helmuth Brinkmann, quickly discovered that while the ship looked impressive on paper, she had some issues. The turbines were temperamental, the fire control systems needed work, and there were about 1 million small technical problems that all needed fixing. It's like buying a new car and immediately needing to take it back to the dealership 17 times. But the Kriegsmarine didn't have time for lengthy shakedown cruises because there was a war on. So in May 1941, just 9 months after commissioning, Prinz Eugen was assigned to the Rhine exercise, alongside the brand new battleship Bismarck. Now, if you know anything about World War II naval history, you know this operation ended really badly for Bismarck. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. The plan was simple. Bismarck and Prinz Eugen would break out into the North Atlantic and wreak absolute havoc on British convoy routes. They'd sink merchant ships, tie up British capital ships trying to hunt them down, and generally make Winston Churchill very angry. On May 18, 1941, the two ships departed Gotenhafen, that's Gdynia in Poland, and began their journey. Almost immediately, they were spotted by Swedish intelligence, who told the British, because neutral countries in World War II had a very flexible definition of the word neutral. The British scrambled everything they had. We're talking battleships, battle cruisers, aircraft carriers, heavy cruisers, and destroyers. Basically, if it floated and had guns, it was sent to find and sink these two ships. On May 23rd, the British cruisers Suffolk and Norfolk made contact in the Denmark Strait between Iceland and Greenland. The weather was terrible, visibility was awful, and everyone was extremely tense. The next morning, May 24th, came the Battle of the Denmark Strait. The British sent in the battle cruiser Hood, the pride of the Royal Navy, and the new battleship Prince of Wales to engage. This is where Prinz Eugen got her first taste of combat. As the British ships opened fire, Prinz Eugen and Bismarck returned in kind. Now, there has been some historical debate about which ship landed the hit that detonated Hood's ammunition magazine, but most historians credit Bismarck. However, Prinz Eugen most definitely scored hits on Hood and Prince of Wales, starting fires and causing damage. Then Hood exploded. One moment she was there, the next she was just gone. Out of a crew of 1,418 men, only 3 survived. It was a catastrophic loss for the Royal Navy and a propaganda victory for Germany. But here's where Prinz Eugen's amazing luck kicked in. During the battle, Bismarck took a hit that ruptured some fuel tanks and caused oil contamination. The decision was made to detach Prinz Eugen to continue solo raiding while Bismarck headed for France for repairs. So on the evening of May 24th, Prinz Eugen slipped away into the fog and headed south. Meanwhile, Bismarck stayed behind to face the music. Now, we all know how that ended 3 days later. Bismarck was at the bottom of the Atlantic and over 2,000 German sailors were dead. Watch out for a future video on the Bismarck engagement. But what happened to the Prinz Eugen? She developed engine trouble, couldn't find any targets, and ended up limping into the port of Brest in France on June 1st. She'd survived her first major operation by basically having mechanical problems at exactly the right time. This would become a recurring theme. Prinz Eugen spent the next several months berthed in Brest undertaking repairs. She sat there being a juicy target for the RAF, who bombed the port constantly. She was hit multiple times but somehow avoided catastrophic damage. By early 1942, Hitler was getting paranoid about Norway. He was convinced that the British were going to invade and wanted his major surface ships up there to defend it. This led to Operation Cerberus, better known as the Channel Dash. On February 11th to 13th, 1942, Prinz Eugen, the battleships Scharnhorst and Gneisenau, and a bunch of smaller ships basically said screw it and ran through the English Channel in broad daylight. This was the naval equivalent of driving through enemy territory with your middle finger out the window. The British were caught completely off guard, due in part to poor weather impacting radar coverage. Despite throwing aircraft, motor torpedo boats, and whatever else they could scramble at the German ships, the fleet made it through. Prinz Eugen hit a mine on the way, but kept going because at this point she was apparently unsinkable. After arriving in Germany, Prinz Eugen was sent to Norway later in February 1942. Her job was to help defend against the invasion that Hitler was sure was coming and that never actually happened. She spent several months up there doing absolutely nothing of significance except consuming fuel and resources. In October 1942, she was detached for training exercises in the Baltic. On her way back to Norway, she got torpedoed by the British submarine HMS Trident. The torpedo hit her stern, blew off her rudder, and basically ruined her entire day. She had to be towed to Germany backwards, which is both hilarious and humiliating for any ship, let alone a heavy cruiser. Repairs took until the January of 1943. At this point, you'd think the Germans would give up on surface ships and focus on U-boats, right? Well, they basically did, but Prinz Eugen still had work to do. For the rest of the war, Prinz Eugen spent most of her time in the Baltic Sea supporting German ground forces. This was actually important work that doesn't get talked about enough. As the Soviet army advanced westward, Prinz Eugen provided naval gunfire support for retreating German troops and helped evacuate civilians from East Prussia. In October 1944, she supported Operation Albion, helping German forces hold the Baltic Islands. Her 8-inch guns provided crucial fire support against Soviet positions. Say what you will about the Nazis, and there's a lot to say, but Prinz Eugen's gunnery crews were extremely good at their jobs. Throughout late 44 and early 45, she continued these shore bombardment missions. She also helped cover the evacuation of German civilians and wounded soldiers from the east in the face of the Soviet advance. She even had a slight romantic moment, if you can call it that, when she accidentally rammed the cruiser Leipzig in foggy conditions. Instead of sinking each other, they remained locked together for over 14 hours, a bizarre metallic embrace in the middle of a war zone. Even in an accident, she managed to survive. Operation Hannibal, which was the evacuation of German civilians from East Prussia, was one of the largest maritime evacuations in history, and Prinz Eugen played a role in providing protection for the refugee ships. But by early 1945, fuel was becoming critical. The German war machine was running on fumes, literally. Prinz Eugen's operations became increasingly limited by lack of fuel oil. In April 1945, Prinz Eugen fired some of the last shots from a German capital ship in World War II, supporting retreating troops. Then, as the war clearly approached its end, she was evacuated to Copenhagen, Denmark, where she surrendered to British forces on May 9, 1945, one day after VE Day. Let's take stock here. Prinz Eugen had survived the entire war. Her sister ship Admiral Hipper was scuttled in 1945 after being bombed to scrap. The Blucher was sunk on the first day of the invasion of Norway in 1940 by Norwegian coastal fortresses. Seydlitz was never completed and the Lutzow was scuttled. But Prinz Eugen, still afloat, still operational. She'd been bombed, mined, torpedoed, and shot at repeatedly, and she was still there. Her luck was absolutely absurd. After the war, the Allies had to figure out what to do with all the German ships. Prinz Eugen was awarded to the United States as a war prize. The US Navy commissioned her as USS Prinz Eugen IX-300, the only German capital ship to serve under the American flag. The Americans sailed her across the Atlantic to Boston in 1946, which must have been deeply weird for her German crew who remained aboard to operate her. Imagine losing the war and then having to sail your ship to the enemy's country while they figure out what to do with it. The US Navy poked around her, studied her design, took notes, and then decided they had the perfect use for her: nuclear weapons testing. So in July 1946, Prinz Eugen participated in Operation Crossroads, the atomic bomb tests at Bikini Atoll. She was placed 1,200 yards from ground zero for the airburst test. The bomb missed its target by 2,000 feet, and Prinz Eugen survived with minor damage, because of course she did. For Test Baker, the underwater burst, she was placed farther away. She managed to survive that one as well, though she was now so radioactive she almost glowed in the dark. The ship that had survived World War II now had the dubious honor of being one of the few vessels to survive 2 nuclear explosions. But her luck was finally running out. The torpedo hit from 1942 had never been properly repaired. In December 1946, 5 months after being nuked twice, Prinz Eugen developed a leak in her poorly repaired stern. On December 22, 1946, she capsized in Kwajalein Lagoon. And there she remains to this day. You can still see part of her hull and one of her propellers sticking out of the water. She's a popular dive site, though the radiation levels mean you probably shouldn't spend too long down there. So what's the legacy of Prinz Eugen? Well, she was present at one of the Royal Navy's worst disasters when Hood exploded. She survived basically every major threat the Allies could throw at her during World War II. She helped evacuate thousands of civilians and provided crucial fire support in the Baltic. She survived 2 nuclear explosions, and she ended her days rusting in a tropical lagoon, which honestly sounds kind of nice compared to being blown apart in the Denmark Strait. She was obsolete before she was even completed. World War II had showed that aircraft carriers and submarines were the future, not surface raiders. But she was well designed, well built, and exceptionally lucky. Her crew clearly knew their business, and she performed her duties effectively throughout the war. The Prinz Eugen represents the end of an era in naval warfare, one of the last gasps of the big gun warships. After the war, the age of the battleship and heavy cruiser was over. Missiles, jets, and nuclear submarines were the future. But man, what a way to go out, from the Denmark Strait to nuclear testing in the Pacific. Prinz Eugen had one hell of a career. If you enjoyed this video, hit that like button and subscribe for more military history content. Let me know in the comments what ship you want me to cover next. Should we do Bismarck's full story? How about a Japanese carrier? Let me know what you think, and remember, in war, it's better to be lucky than good. Prinz Eugen was both. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.